What's up everyone, ImSidVicious and today we're covering my 3.28 Ice Spear Totem Hierophant. We're going to cover the campaign, the League Star version, the early mapping, the mid-game progression, the end-game scaling version. Now before we get into all of that, I just wanted to put together a montage. Hope everyone liked that little montage. I need to practice my editing skills somewhere so I could start getting better, but I will play some raw footage so you can get a better feel for the build. Now before we get into the guide, there's a lot to cover, so here's a quick overview of everything in this guide. While the footage plays in the background, let's take a look at some patch notes. First, I'm not going to read the whole novel, just the stuff that matters for this build. The big one is the totem placement speed now scales the speed at which totems emerge. We don't fully know how it's going to feel until we test this out in game, but theoretically this is a straightforward quality of life buff. Because our build already gets a ton of totem placement speed, especially from our Ascendancy. So if this works the way it sounds, totems should feel a lot snappier, and that's a massive buff. Second, the Holy Flame Totem is getting a buff, more projectiles, and now it has the AoE tag, which means we can pick up nearby AoE nodes for extra damage. And I love the totem fantasy from the start, so I level with Holy Flame Totems as soon as I can. This buff is just a clean win for our campaign leveling. Alright, that's it for the patch notes. Let's talk about the pros and cons for this build, and then we'll get into the build overview. Let's start with the pros first. Number one, this build has massive damage and crazy scaling. Early game you can buy cheap items and immediately start deleting bosses. This is also one of the builds that can become a carry build for void stones, bossing services, and if you're experienced enough you can even scale this into feared carries. And once you're geared, you basically delete everything. Totems also give you the most underrated advantage in the game, which is high uptime DPS. Other builds stop dealing damage when they have to dodge mechanics, but with totems, your damage stays online as long as the totems are alive. That makes it beginner friendly. You just place your totems and focus on the mechanics. Also, I'm here to guide you along the way with this video, so that's definitely a pro as well. As for map mods, you can run almost everything. The main annoying one is Elemental Reflect because traditionally totems can't get reflect immunity. I did see reflect changes in the patch notes, so I'll be testing whether totems can become reflect immune. But if that happens, that's going to be huge for our build. As for the cons, the community calls this build a glass cannon build, and that's honestly an outdated take. Historically it was, and some people to this day still play the build fully glass cannon. I put a lot of work into layering defenses over the leagues. When we get to the POBs you'll see a lot of block, and you can also check out the gameplay VODs or how it actually performs. The other con to this build is gem swapping. For mapping we use Freezing Pulse or Ice Spear of Splitting. And for bossing, we swap to Ice Spear. Later on, when damage is high enough, you don't even care as much, but early mid-game it's the part of the build where you will have to gem swap. And of course, not everyone likes the totem playstyle, but if you've never tried it, it's worth giving it a real shot. Let me show you how to play the build. Let's separate this into the mapping playstyle and bossing playstyle. For the mapping playstyle, keep it simple. Place the totems in front of you, they delete the screen, you flame dash forward, and repeat. Once your movement speed and damage ramps up, it becomes a flow state. Totems forward, flame dash, totems forward, flame dash. And if you flame dash into mobs, then place your totems after, that's called inting, and you don't want to do that. Early on, if damage is lower, play a little bit slower. But once the build finally comes online, you're basically sprinting while the totems do the work. The bossing playstyle is slightly different. You want to place totems to the side or behind the boss. Why? Because totems can taunt with the mastery, and they can rotate the boss away from you and make certain fights way safer. Also, place them in two groups, some on the left, some on the right. So if the boss slams and wipes out one set of totems, you still have DPS running while you replace the dead ones. Your only job in boss fights is keep totems up and dodge. Also, don't forget to use Arcanist brand, which is part of your single target damage along with your bone chill setup. All you have to do is drop the brand on top of the boss and you're good to go. Now that you understand totem placement, let's focus on the gem setups. Ice Spear is the main bossing setup. It's going to be our single target skill. For mapping, you gem swap to Freezing Pulse or Ice Spear of Splitting. Personally, I think Ice Spear of Splitting is the best feeling clear once your damage is high enough. It's just projectile splitting everywhere. Super satisfying gameplay. Now for our main core setups, we're going to be using increased crit damage, greater multiple projectiles, multiple totems, hypothermia, and returning projectiles. Returning projectiles is insanely strong. It's hard to fully POB this perfectly, but in practice it's somewhere around 30 to 35% more damage when the projectile returns and hits the target. Next thing is the curse setup. This is huge. Arcanist brand applies everything linked to it, and everything that's linked are our curses. So we run Frostbite, Elemental Weakness, Sniper's Mark, and Punishment. If you don't have the staff linked yet, or you're limited early on, just start with Frostbite, Elemental Weakness, and Sniper's Mark, and then add Punishment whenever you can. Also, we gotta talk about the Cold Snap plus Bone Chill tech. This is mainly here to apply Bone Chill, and Bone Chill basically makes enemies take increased cold damage based on the chill effect. Think of it like a cold version of shock-like scaling. We link Cold Snap to Bone Chill support and Unbound Ailments. Unbound Ailments will scale our Bone Chill. Also, our fourth link, we will put Cull support. It's just free damage on everything you're already doing, and the Cull just lets you execute bosses. For our defensive link, we have Cast When Damage Taken plus Immortal Call. Keep this low level around level 7 so it triggers frequently while mapping. Next thing is our Arcane Cloak. I prefer Arcane Cloak on a manual setup. You can also add automation to automate it, but for bossing, it's better to press the button whenever you think you're going to take a big hit. For movement, I use Flame Dash. This is the endgame movement button I like. Early on, you can use Leap Slam, but later the socket pressures get tight and all you can really have is Flame Dash for better bossing experience anyways. For our aura, we use Zealotry plus Eternal Blessing. This locks out other auras, but it gives a huge damage boost to our more spell damage and crit scaling. Pantheon wise, we're not doing anything fancy. We're just going with the traditional Brine Kings so that we don't get frozen. And then for minor, early on, you can pick up Yugal. This will give us some curse reduction for our Soul Mantle. Later on, you can swap to Aberrath when you're doing your red altars. Brine King is always almost the best default choice, and you can play around with the minor gods depending on the content that you're doing. Now it's time to get very detailed, and let's talk about the POB and how it's structured with multiple loadouts and how each loadout is basically a step-by-step checkpoint. What you'll see is after each act where you should be, what you're targeting, what links you want, and what passive pathing to follow on the tree. And in the notes section, I have a written guide that takes you all the way from the beach to the campaign, early maps, your void stones, endgame juicing. I also have a little bit of SSF notes for all the SSF enjoyers out there as well. If you want the zero thinking version of progression, just follow the POB loadouts in order and take a look at the notes section and you will be fine. Every build has to start in the campaign, so here's my leveling guide for the campaign. Make sure to check out my SSF campaign run VOD, which will be in my YouTube live section. It will cover everything you need from character creation all the way to the startup maps. It's got full commentary and I try to explain my decision making as I go along the way. TLDR, I yap. But let's get into the guide and let's start with Act 1. Starting with Rolling Magma, and then we will swap to Holy Flame Totem as soon as you get it, around level 4. Your goal links early on are red, red, blue, or red, blue, blue. The best setup is going to be Holy Flame Totem with Flamewood and Combustion. If you get red, blue, blue, then use Infused Channeling until you can switch to Flamewood. Other important skill gems to pick up in Act 1 are Frostblink, pair it with Arcane Surge to give you a little more damage, Flame Wall to combo with the Holy Flame Totem, and then later grab Clarity. Also, Transmute matter a lot in the campaign, so sell your unidentified blue items for Transmute shards. Transmutes are your currency engine for early crafting in the campaign. I include a full campaign loot filter. It highlights links, jewelry upgrades, and key bases like Citron, amulets, and heavy belts. Also, I have an optional speedrunning tech where I weapon swap with Leap Slam and Momentum on my red-green axes and sword, then switch back to wands for fighting. Use the regex at the vendors. All you have to do is paste this text to look for items we want. I have 2 regexes, one for our build and the other for speedrunning. I'll talk more about loot filters later on. End of Act 1, you want to gamble for some wands before you fight Merveil. If you hit some early spell damage on some goat horns, your damage is going to spike. For Act 2, all you have to worry about is picking up Herald of Thunder for extra damage. For Act 3, pick up Flammability for single target. Also in Act 3, don't forget to grab the crafting recipe in Solaris level 2 for added fire damage to spells. This craft will carry your entire campaign run. Act 4, you can pick up Sigil of Power, optional but nice. Greater multiple projectiles is going to be a massive power spike once you get a 4-link as well. So for your 4-link priority, your core gem setup is always going to stay the following: Holy Flame Totems, Flamewood, and Combustion. 4th link depends on sockets, whether you get green, which will be greater multiple projectiles, blue, which will be Fist Lightning, and red will be Cruelty. GMP is the best damage upgrade because the Flamewood mortars will start shotgunning. In Acts 5 and 6, there is a 5-link that could potentially drop. In prior leagues, Slay Pens and Twilight Strand could drop a 5-link from the league mechanic. In 3.28, if that's still a thing, make sure to do the league mechanic in these zones for a chance for a big 5-link drop. If you get a 5-link, you're going to stay with the mandatory setup of Holy Flame Totems, Flamewood, Support, Combustion, and greater multiple projectiles. Then add added cold damage or added lightning or cruelty depending on the colors that you get. As for the Ascendancy Order, the first Ascendancy we're going to take is Pursuit of Fate. +1 totems is very strong for a totem build. Second, we're going to take Arcane Blessing. Here we can drop Arcane Surge support from our gear, since with this Ascendancy, we will have a permanent uptime on Arcane Surge now. Finally, for our 3rd lab, we will pick up Ritual of Awakening. Before you're about to fight Eater and Exarch, it's a good idea to do the 4th lab and get Conviction of Power. Stay on Holy Flame Totems until yellow maps. You can run Holy Flame Totem leveling setup all the way into early endgame while you're building currency to swap to our main build. Once you have the key uniques, you can swap into the real Ice Spear Freezing Pulse setup. Alright, campaign done. Now we're in the part that matters, getting the build online for your first 2 Void Stones. Early mapping goal is simple, get the Soul Mantle package online. The shopping list is getting the Soul Mantle and for linking it yourself, picking up Kikuzaru to get the 60% curse reduction, and then this time we're going Tarn Shiver, a very nice early staff option. Also, you want to pick up 1 or 2 rare jewels with reduced curse effect, or take curse reduction on the tree. You will need 2 in order to be fully curse immune, since each jewel would be 30% curse reduction, but 1 is manageable early on. You can also deal with curse effect reduction via Hinekora, Death Ward, and tattoos. We don't need that many intelligence nodes anyways, or you could use the Pantheon with the Minor God of Yugol to give you some curse reduction as well. This is the new adjustment I have made for this build with the utilization of Tarn Shiver. We can become more tanky and have a smoother mapping experience by having a higher block chance. A couple of other items to help our damage are Self-Flagellation and Dodri's Damning. This setup is designed for your 2 Voidstone run, which I guess is now just called a 1 Voidstone run, with Eater and Exarch being 1 Voidstone altogether. Again, a reminder to do your 4th lab before Eater and Exarch, and get your 4th Ascendancy, which will be Conviction of Power. All the items listed are going to be omega cheap, but let's say you are a power gamer and you have some currency, pick up Anathema's Ring, and this will give you big DPS with our curse setup. Just use Arcanist Brand with Frostbite, Elemental Weakness, and Sniper's Mark. Important note, this transition phase, early maps into mid game, is the weakest part of the build because you're still on a 4 link. If you have a 5 link, add Hypothermia. With this early setup, you're already sitting on a solid block setup with a roughly 73% attack block and 59% spell block depending on your exact gear. On a side note that I want to mention, if you have played my build last league and want to use the Wands and Scepters, feel free to do so. I'm not sure how rare the Toolborn Wands are going to be, but if you can pick them up, they are giga damage. You won't be able to set up block and your defenses will be lacking, so keep that in mind when speccing point into the passive tree. I want to mention I did also do a SSF 2 stone run, and I left a couple of SSF notes, and there's a SSF loadout as well, so you can check and see what I did. TLDR is I had to gamba for a 5 link staff. Once you're stable, we stop buying cheap fixes and start buying multipliers. Mid-game is where the build starts to ramp up. The first thing you're going to focus on is some cluster jewels. We're going to get a large cluster jewel and we want Prismatic Heart. The other notables don't matter as much. Prismatic Heart is the big one because it gives us damage plus resistance, which becomes important a little bit later. If you look at my passive tree, you can see the difference between an 8 notable with just Prismatic Heart versus another cluster jewel with Prismatic Heart and another notable. If you can get 2 notable, you will end up spending less passive points. Also, any other notable that gives you resistance or dexterity is ideal. Let's talk about some medium cluster jewels. Eye to Eye and Repeater is the classic, just simply straight up damage. And another medium cluster jewel that we want to get is Sleepless Sentries plus Ancestral Echo. Now the Sleepless Sentries mod is pretty rare, so they tend to be expensive. Sleepless Sentries is a massive damage boost because it gives us Onslaught. Remember, with medium cluster jewels, try to aim for 4 to 5 passives, never pick the one with 6 passives. If you can get bonus dex and resistance on these, that's even better. I want to point out one thing as we transition from early game setup to mid game setup. All you want to do in terms of the passive tree is just go towards the first cluster jewel setup. As you level from level 80 to roughly 90, 95, fill up your cluster jewels first, before going into the second cluster jewel setup. And once you can buy your second cluster jewel setup, then you can start respecking nodes like the Heart of Ice cluster and its travel nodes. Our next couple of upgrades are going to be picking up level 21 gems. You don't have to get them 21-20 quality, you just have to get them level 21. And these are going to be our Ice Spear and /Ore Freezing Pulse. They're usually cheap because not many people play this skill, or you may be leveling these on your offhand and you can corrupt them yourself. Our next step is to get a 6th link, and I think it's the best shown with a video, so let me just add that in so you can see how to get a 6th link. First, we just buy a corrupted soul mantle with a decent implicit, if possible like +1 to socket of gems or +2 to projectile gems, or corrupted ourselves for a decent implicit. Let's take a look at the video. Okay guys, I'm going to show you guys how to 6th link a soul mantle. So the first thing we're going to do is armor scrap. We want to try to get a very high percentage. 19 is good enough. We go to the crafting bench, we're going to type in socket, and what we're going to do is we're going to use jeweler orbs, vol orbs to get 4 sockets. Once we get 4, we could apply a tainted jeweler, and if we lose it, we have to reapply this to get 4. Boom. We're just going to do this until we have 6, just like that. Now the same thing you want to do with fusings and 4 link. Make sure that says 4 links, because if you accidentally click this, it's going to go back to 4 sockets. So make sure 4 link just like that. Then we are going to use fusings. Again, anytime you miss, you got to recraft to go to 4, 5. We lost it again, go back. Takes a couple of tries, just like that. Boom. And then the final step is to color. So this process, same thing, it's a little gamba. We want to try to get 3 greens. Yeah, just like that. 3 greens, 2 blues, 1 red, and there you go. You have your 6th link. Okay, back from the video, let's jump straight into our next purchase. This will be the Annihilating Light. This staff is pretty expensive early, but will quickly fall in price within 3 days. This staff is a nuke, both in terms of giving you high damage and also tanking your resistance. So mid-game becomes a res cap puzzle. Try to get a 60 to 62% staff and then aim for the following items: triple res helmet, some res boots and gloves, Stygian Vice with a jewel with res life and dexterity if you can, cluster jewel with res and dexterity, better rings that you will replace your Kikuzaru for. Removing Kikuzaru also presents another problem, which will need to be fixed via our curse reduction jewels. But now we should have some currency to try to get curse reduction and get 1 or 2 beneficial stat listed in the notes section. Remember, you can also use Hinekura Death Warden tattoos on your int passives to get some curse reduction as well. Another thing to point out is that switching from Tarn Shiver to Annihilating Light, we kind of swap our block. We will be more spell block heavy with 72% spell block and 48% attack block. This will be a stronger setup for bossing. Mid-game is strong, but endgame is where we start stacking unfair upgrades, extra projectiles, pain attunement, and curse immunity. For our endgame upgrades, the order can shift a bit, but here's the general path. Expect things to be expensive. Let's talk about the transition of our mid-game passive tree to our endgame passive tree. We should be able to pick up some easy endgame upgrades with simply pathing towards jewel sockets. Then later, we can do a belt swap. This is where we will have to do a bunch of respec for our cluster jewels to fit everything within our setup. So let's talk about our first upgrade. Rain and Splinters. Huge upgrade for our damage because we're already near a jewel socket. This is a damage multiplier Any increase in number of projectile is a damage multiplier for our build. Then we can pick up some Flask, Dying Sun, and Bottle Fate. We want to enchant both of these with the Flask effect of increased effect. For Dying Sun, anything above 50% effect still gives +1 projectile, so don't stress over trying to get a perfect 70% roll. But for Bottle Fate, we want to try to achieve the 70% increased effect. Coward's Legacy and Pain Attunement. This is one of the biggest pressure points because you lose your belt slot, so res balancing becomes a thing again. But once you slot it in, you go low life and take Pain Attunement for massive damage multiplier. This build is a huge power spike. Also, you want to kind of combo buy this with a large cluster jewel. Buy them together, the belt and the cluster jewel, so that you can deal with the resistance. For cluster jewel, you're aiming for 35% increase effect, 3% cast speed, and then choose the best based on your needs, your resistance, attributes, life, damage. Most likely, you're going to try to get all your resistance here. Also, the notable passive should be 12. We want to get as many of these small nodes as possible. Next, we want to deal with curse immunity for good, and that's going to be via Sublime Vision with a Zealotry jewel. Once you have your curse immune Zealotry Sublime Vision, you can drop reduce curse effect jewels tattoos and replace them with pure damage jewels. So with your new jewel slots open, you can start looking for 3 to 4 stat jewels for crit multi and cast speed. Then we have our Timeless Jewel, Militant Fate with High Templar Dominus. This gives us Inner Conviction, which is just more spell damage per power charge. And since we have 4 of them, 12% more spell damage is very, very strong. Great value for us. Just make sure it doesn't break any important notables you're taking. Watcher's Eye is, of course, in every single endgame build, and we're going to try to pick up a double Zealotry mod Watcher's Eye with penetration and cast speed. Double mod is expensive, but it's one of the cleanest power upgrades we can get. For our endgame anoint, we are going to pick up Wood, Stone, and Spell. This scales our Arcane Surge effect based on how many totems we have. And this will account for 10% of our overall damage, which is a massive damage upgrade. Finally, it's time to talk about your true final item, which is going to be the amulet. It's going to be the Giga Amulet with +2 cold, +2 spell, with either crit multi or cast speed or minimum frenzy. Price wise, if this thing hits a mirror tier, don't get baited. It's extremely annoying to craft, but I'd probably pay around 100 to 150 divines unless the market is doing something insane. It's a lot of chaos rerolling to craft this, and also the base is very expensive, but a bunch of hit and miss steps and makes it very, very annoying to craft. This amulet is for the Giga Chads, and don't worry, we will work our way to the step. And that's the full build breakdown. Everything I just said is already organized for you. POB loadouts, notes, loot filters, trade links, all in the description. In the description, you'll find the POB with all the loadouts. And within the POB, you'll see a written guide in the notes section. Also, for my 3.28 loot filter, all you have to do is click on my loot filter link. It will take you to my profile on the POB or POE website, and then you can just click follow for my 3.28 lead filters. I have a couple in there. Just follow for the campaign, the early mid game, and the uber strict end game, and they will be available to you in game for you to use. The trade links with the full shopping list is also in the notes section at the very bottom. You need to use a Chrome add-on called Better Trade. Copy the long text, make sure you copy the whole thing, then go to the POE trade website, and the Better Trade should be active on the side. Click the import folder, and voila, you have a ready to go shopping. Like, you can just click and all these items show up. Make sure to change the league at the top once Mirage begins. If you want to see some real gameplay footage, check the VODs on my channel, mapping bosses and the full progression, my full SSF run to get an idea of what everything looks like. If this helped, drop a like, sub for more PoE builds and strategy guides. I'll be making a bunch of currency guides and update videos as the league goes on. I'll also be multi-streaming on Twitch and YouTube. You can find the links in the description. Come and stop by. And I think that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed the build guide. I know there were so many of you guys from last league that loved it so much, so I can't wait for the league launch to hang out with all of you. And finally, I'm ImSidVicious, and I will see you later. Peace.